What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here. Back again talking college football. It is week 8. We are talking about the Saturday main slate, all the marquee games, and we will get to 11 of them today. If I missed your game, something you want to hear about, a game, a player, anything, leave it in the comments and we'll try to get to that on Friday when we get to our extra show, our G5 show, the greasy games, everything we missed on this show. If you like this content, please consider subscribing or leaving a like. That helps a small channel like this a ton. If you've done that, thank you, thank you, thank you. It really does make a huge difference for us as we try to grow. Last thing, if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, we're going to go through a lot of SEC Big Ten games, top of the Big 12 and the ACC, of course. Leading things off with Ole Miss taking on Georgia. Ole Miss gets a test here after got a scare last week against Washington State. They were 32-point favorites, and they win the game by 3 points. Even worse, a Washington State team that was really banged up coming into the contest. It's kind of inexcusable, but at the same time, with Georgia on deck, you kind of understand the look-ahead spot. Ole Miss did have a turnover on down at the Washington 4-yard line. They missed a field goal, and they fumbled on the Washington State 28. So they had a lot of chances to potentially make that a 10 to 17, maybe even a 21-point game. You still weren't covering the spread there. Otherwise, Ole Miss has lived a little dangerously when they've played decent teams. We saw them beat Arkansas by single digits, Kentucky by single digits, LSU by 11 points. That's their best win by far. But it has not been all roses for this Ole Miss team, even as they head into this game with an undefeated record. Meanwhile, Georgia, they come into the season with kind of some up and down performances. They beat Tennessee with a 24% post-game win expectancy. They give it right back in their next game against Alabama with a loss and an 80% post-game win expectancy. So that went both ways. They steal a win they shouldn't have. They give one up they should have won. And in their last 2 games, they beat Kentucky, followed by Auburn. The Auburn game was really close. They finished with a 54% post-game win expectancy. Yards per play was almost dead even. And Georgia had to overcome a deficit that could have been worse. Auburn fumbled trying to cross the plane from the 1-yard line that would have put them up 17-0. However, game flips on that play. A couple turnover on downs from both sides. Auburn had 13 penalties to Georgia's 6. And in a game that ended up being pretty greasy, that turnover on the goal line ends up deciding it in a game that was very, very close. So in this contest moving forward, we have only Austin Simmons banged up for Ole Miss. That's not really new, and it doesn't matter. Trinidad Chambliss has won that job. For Georgia, Daniel Harris has been out at defensive back. He's a weak link back there, so I'm not sure it matters. And Ernest Green on the offensive line. He's been out for a while. He was allegedly available, but they didn't play him, and they didn't need to. They did get back Monroe Freeling and Micah Morris on the offensive line, which was huge for them. For Ole Miss, Trinidad Chambliss is under center. He's had a great start to the season, 9.9 yards per attempt. That's nearly a first down every time he's dropping back to throw the ball. Now, it hasn't been the best slate of competition. He is mobile. He doesn't take a lot of sacks. He's only had 5 of them. The only problem with his game is he's a little bit limited because of his size, but Trinidad is still giving them chances to win games. And honestly, just put the ball in position for the elite skill players to make some plays. And in the receiver room, Harrison Wallace leads the group. You have 2 strong tight ends. Daquan Wright leads that group. Deuce Alexander, Caden Lee, and Dazon Stribling have played more rotational roles, role player roles, and that's been fine. On the ground, this team is 20th in efficiency because you have Kewan Lacey, and then Trinidad Chambliss himself is at 4.6 yards per carry. It's a good group of skill position players. If they're held back by any unit, it is going to be the offensive line, which still below average. They're 60th in pass blocking, 103rd in run blocking. They face one strong defensive line in Kentucky, but the rest of these units that they've faced have their flaws. When you look at the composition of the O-line, I'm more worried about the interior than the tackles at this point. Jaden Williams and Diego Pounds have been all right, but that is probably going to be the biggest concern, and it's definitely a concern in this game when you find yourself as a touchdown underdog to Georgia. Now, I don't think we mentioned the spread. Georgia is a touchdown favorite. The total is 54.5, just to circle back there briefly. But can this Ole Miss offense score on Georgia's defense? I sort of think Georgia's defense is composed in a way that will give this Ole Miss team problems. Now, this Georgia team has struggled to rush the passer all season long. They're 122nd in pass rush. They faced some good offenses. They faced some bad ones. It hasn't gotten home regardless. The one thing that gives me some hope is their best player up front is Kristen Miller. He's a defensive tackle, so he's going to line up against the interior Ole Miss offensive line, where ideally you want to beat that team. And then for all the limitations pass rushing, Georgia is third in run defense. They're a very hard team to run on. Now, they haven't faced a slew of rushing QBs. The best quarterbacks they've played are Joey Aguilar and Ty Simpson. Simpson is a little mobile, but he's nothing like Trinidad Chambliss. So that's at least a question. Through the air, Aguilar was at 10.3 yards per attempt, Simpson at 7.2. So Georgia's defense, there are cracks kind of like there were last year. No edge rushing presence so far. Miller's good inside. Your studs, CJ Allen and KJ Bolden, are your studs for a reason, but you're still rotating players, especially on the back end. Alice Robinson, the five-star freshman, has begun rotating with DeMello Jones. At safety, Kyron Jones is rotating with Ja'Cory Thomas. I don't know how that's going to shake out. It has been inconsistent week to week. So I think Ole Miss does have some success. Lane Kiffin's a master game planner. He'll find these weaknesses more than likely with Trinidad Chambliss and these skill players. On the other side, Georgia with Gunnar Stockton, 68% completion percentage, 7.5 yards per attempt. He has 6 big-time throws and 5 turnover-worthy plays. He's taken 8 sacks, which isn't that high. It's a decent pressure-to-sack ratio for him. The wide receivers have an 8% drop rate, and that's been a problem for them all season. They just haven't lived up to expectation. Colby Young leads the team with 300 yards. Zachariah Branch isn't far behind at 291, but those are pretty underwhelming numbers considering what they've invested in this receiving corps. Zachariah Branch was the crown jewel among transfer receivers in this cycle, and he's just flat out not lived up to expectation. Then they're rotating a lot of players. One answer they've tried to go out and find has been via tight ends. You're seeing Lawson Lucky and Oscar Delp play a lot together. In their most recent contest against Auburn, they were essentially in 12 personnel the entire time, over 50%. Maybe that was to try to mitigate the edge rush like Kedrick Falk on the other side. I'm not sure, but it limited the snaps of the receivers. And the run game has not been a difference-making unit either. They are 70th in rushing efficiency. Chauncey Bowens is at 5.3 yards per carry. He leads the unit, but he ceded work last week. And again, this might just be a hot hand with Nate Frazier, McCray, Phillips. I'm not sure. I've been impressed with the offensive line, so at the very least, I think your infrastructure is solid. They've been banged up all season long. They do get back Freeling, they get back Micah Morris. If they can get back Ernest Green, they might be dealing with all players above average because Juan Gaston's had to play, Bo Hughley's had to play. They've had to go deeper than that at times. But really, just Gaston has been a complete mess. So if you can remove him from the lineup, Hughley's been fine. But if you can remove one of them, both of them, and put Ernest Green back in, then we might be dealing with a top 30-ish offensive line because they still come in 24th in pass blocking, 44th in run blocking with the injuries. It's a good unit. And I'm not sure I buy Ole Miss's defense. They faced one top 80 offense in the country. That was Arkansas, who absolutely demolished them. Taylor Green was at 8.7 yards per attempt. Now, their other quarterbacks they faced, Zach Calzada, Jake Retzlaff, Garrett Nussmeier, who's had a bad year, and Zevi Eckhouse. So, yeah, they come in 40th in coverage, but how much of that is Ole Miss versus how much of that is the opposing signal callers? Not to mention, Arkansas hit 6 yards per carry on the ground. That's been a consistent problem. Georgia State, 5.5 yards per carry. Kentucky and LSU were both at 4.6. Their front has played a little better in recent weeks, and this was supposed to be the strength of the team with Harris, Eccles, Cam Franklin, and Suntarine Perkins. They're decent in run defense, and they're still not rushing the passer. So I give the edge in that matchup to the Georgia offensive line. From there, the secondary is still a question for me. They're 40th in coverage, but again, I think that's more a neutral matchup because I don't really buy Georgia's pass catchers and I don't really buy Ole Miss's secondary because of who they faced this year. But that leads me to a potential over in this game. That is where we lean beneath the key number of 55. Pace should be good. Ole Miss will pace up Georgia more than likely, and Georgia's pace is around average. They're slightly below that, but both defense have cracks. Georgia, it's more player personnel thing. And Ole Miss, I think it's more a level of competition thing. We weren't expecting them to be an amazing defense. They only brought back 3 starters, and most of them were up front. But that unit just really hasn't played anyone of consequence. So that's where we lean. We're going to debate this throughout the week and see where it closes before playing anything. Next up, Tennessee, Alabama. We remain in the SEC. This game has an 8-point spread in favor of Alabama. The total is 58.5. To get here, Tennessee has had a relatively easy path. They beat Syracuse a little harder at the time because Angeli was healthy. They lose to Georgia in the game they should have won. We just went over that, a 76% post-game win expectancy. They beat Mississippi State in overtime. That was a 67% post-game win expectancy. And then last week, they beat Arkansas by a field goal with an 86% post-game win expectancy. Now, Tennessee had 10 penalties that ruined a lot of their drives, and Arkansas only had one somehow in the entire game. The reason Tennessee is able to overcome this, Arkansas had 3 turnovers, 2 of them, and a turnover on down, so this is 3 times they turned the ball over, were in Tennessee territory. They also had a fumble at their own 15, which led directly to a Tennessee touchdown. So when you're the less penalized team like Arkansas was, you can't afford those turnovers. That's literally what gave Tennessee the game in that spot. On the Bama side, this team has looked great since they had the Florida State loss, which is probably the most puzzling outcome we've seen this year. In the games that matter, they beat Georgia. They should have lost that game again. We talked about that one, 20% post-game win expectancy. They beat Vanderbilt 30-14. They scored on a garbage time touchdown at the very end of that contest. Vanderbilt actually moved the ball well, especially on the ground. And what limited them was 2 red zone turnovers that resulted directly in 10 Alabama points. And then in their last game, Missouri, they had a 28% post-game win expectancy, lost yards per play 5.9 to 4.3. The first Alabama touchdown was an absolute gift from Missouri after a taunting penalty. Like, they had Alabama dead to rights about to punt, and then Missouri gets the taunting that extends the drive. Alabama ends up scoring. From there, it was kind of back and forth. Alabama did fumble on their own 24. That was a Missouri touchdown. Missouri threw an interception at their own 43. Luckily, Bama missed the field goal. But then Missouri faked a punt at their own 37. And it wasn't like they were down 21 points either. That was a perplexing call. So they faked the punt, and that's a Bama touchdown immediately after. From there, Missouri threw an interception to end the game. The only other thing that was kind of weird, there was that Alabama touchdown where Ty Simpson's knee was actually down before he handed it off, which turned a touchdown into a field goal. But at the end of the day, post-game, still favored Missouri. They were the better team, just didn't do enough to win because of their mistakes. As far as this contest, Tennessee versus Bama, you have Joey Aguilar, who's really impressed me under center, the App State quarterback who really struggled with turnovers in the Sun Belt. He has 2 turnover-worthy plays on the year. He has 2 sacks on the year. This is an incredible way to mitigate negative plays. And he has the big plays to go along with it. 9.2 yards per attempt, a 64% completion percentage. It would be better if his receivers hadn't dropped 12.5% of his catchable targets as well. And the skill players, I think, are a little fragile just because they're not deep, but they're pretty strong up top. Chris Brazell's up to 536 yards. His ability to win downfield has been very eye-opening this year. We saw that specifically against Georgia, where he was mossing defenders. And Braylon Staley and Mike Matthews, the 2 elite recruits that they needed to step up this year, have. They're both above 400 yards. Even your run game with Deshaun Bishop and Star Thomas, completely fine. Now, both those guys, Bishop especially, has been banged up. Staley's also been banged up. But after their last game, Heupel came out and said he expects them both to play. So that leaves Tennessee very healthy on offense. They have a couple of defensive injuries. We'll get to those in a second. But the skill players are solid. And the offensive line has been a little better than expected. They've only faced 1 pass rush inside the top 100. That was Arkansas. So it has been an easy road. And part of that is just Georgia not living up to expectation. Generally, Georgia on your schedule means a good pass rush. This year it doesn't. So they're 10th in pass blocking, 91st in run blocking. Done a couple weird things. Sam Pendleton hit the bench at center last week. I don't know if this was injury or benching. That was for William Satterwhite. An interesting choice because Pendleton's definitively been better. And then I know David Sanders, their 5-star freshman, they wanted to get him active and get some snaps, but they've been benching Jesse Perry for him, or at least rotating him, and Sanders has not been good. So at some point, I think you just gotta be like, if it's not broke, don't fix it, man. Like, we don't need to force Sanders out there when Perry has been more than reasonable up front. So I don't know. They're doing some weird stuff on the O-line. That remains to be seen. Bama is too. We'll get there. On Bama's defense, it's another unit that's not rushing the passer. They're 114th. And flat out, they just haven't gotten the production out of Jan Zapier, Keon Keeley. LT Overton's been okay, but he has not lived up to the expectations. And inside, this team is a mess. They still have not defended the run well. That's even with Tim Keenan back. They've consistently been losing in the trenches on defense. And I'm not really sure why. They've now allowed their last 3 opponents, Georgia, Vandy, and Missouri, to hit all 5.8 yards per carry or more. Now, the pass defense has improved. Bray Hubbard's played a lot better since that Florida State game. Kean Sab has been good. They're rotating a few corners. The benching of Damani Jackson probably warranted after his lackluster effort on the Brett Norfleet touchdown. But there are cracks in this Alabama defense. I expect Tennessee to move the ball. On the other side, Bama, they're the hurt team comparatively. Most of the injuries are in this matchup, like Jamarian Lathan, Quay Rousseau off the edge. It definitely doesn't help Bama, but that unit's been a disaster. Ryan Williams is dealing with an injury. I'm not sure if his limited snaps last week were the result of that, because he was probable, or if this is a talent thing and it has to do with the drops. I hate to say this. He's been outplayed by Jeremy Bernard. He's been outplayed by freshman Latia Brooks. I'm really curious what Derek Meadows would have done if he didn't get concussed on his first snap. He had a great catch. And then the last thing on the offense, Jam Miller went down with a concussion as well. Tennessee's defense, it's the secondary. It's going to be a mess all season long. Ricky Gibson and Jermod McCoy have been out for this team. So we'll start there. Tennessee's defense still comes in 23rd. They are 37th in coverage. They have not faced an offense ranked lower than 67th either, at least among the main competitors. We don't count low-level G5s or FCS. They still have allowed Taylon Green 8.3 yards per attempt, Gunnar Stockton 9.5. Those are really the only two that have found success. So it's been a bit up and down for Tennessee, but good offenses can certainly throw the ball. Against the run, they've been good. Only Arkansas was able to run the ball on them. It kind of makes sense. You have two good edge setters in Joshua Joseph and Tyree West. They're studs. Really just expecting the secondary to be a problem at times for this unit. So can Alabama exploit that? Ty Simpson has been surgical. His completion percentage is 70.5, 8.8 yards per attempt, only 5 turnover-worthy plays. He's taken 12 sacks, but that's not a bad number by any means, considering the pressure rate's 29%. The drop rate is down. It was around 9% last week. It's down to 6.9. My only note there is it's just crazy how your drop percentage decreases when you take Ryan Williams off the field. I legitimately don't know what they should do with him, man. He's been, again, outplayed by younger players. And you want to keep giving your elite, highly talented players chances, and I think they should. But, man, at some point, you got to go to Bernard, Latsier, Brooks, and Horton, I think. We'll see what they decide to do. The offensive line is a little weird for Bama, just like Tennessee. They're rotating all of their guards, and now they're rotating right tackle between Formby and his backup. So Carroll, that is. They allowed 12 pressures to a good Missouri defensive line, which is a reasonable number. So this offensive line, despite all the rotating, has still played well. And Caden Proctor, a little bit of a rough start to the season. He has settled in, not just on the gadget plays where he's a ball carrier, but as a true left tackle, he's played better too. So can Tennessee take advantage of this? Tennessee has, we mentioned it, a great pass rush. They're top 10 in the country there. I still have questions with their coverage. So I think as long as Bama can stand up against those edge rushers, you should be able to throw the ball over the top of Tennessee. But ultimately in this game, mathematically, we made this inside 8. If you guys have been watching the show for any length of time in the summer, you know that I love Bama, and I thought this was the best team heading into the country. I no longer think that, but that was the expectation before the season. Alano makes this -4, which I certainly do not love, backing a Tennessee team that I think is still relatively untested comparatively. And Tennessee is flat out not as talented, really across the board, almost at every position compared to Alabama. So that's my hesitation. But mathematically, we do show some value to Tennessee. And honestly, I think it makes sense. They're a very talented team as well. So we'll debate this. I want to see where it moves. 8's just not quite enough for me on this. As far as the total goes, we make it 59.8, so very close to the current number. USC Notre Dame, a fun game here. This is the third toughest game for Notre Dame, and really their last super challenging game of the season. They're going to need it. USC bounced back nicely after the Illinois disaster with a pretty resounding win over Michigan. So to this point now, USC has beaten up on really easy teams: Missouri State, Georgia Southern, Purdue, Michigan State. So it was good to see them beat Michigan, and very interesting game plan for them. They flat out did not play nickel in this game. They took a third line. They don't usually do this. They took a third linebacker. He was on the field almost every single play. They took their nickel corner off the field, and they dared Michigan to throw. And Michigan had some success. Underwood was at 8 yards per attempt, but it was not consistent enough to win this game. Michigan failed the test. In the contest, USC could have scored more as well. They fumbled at the Michigan 29. They threw an interception at the Michigan 15. Luckily, Michigan gave that one right back with an interception of their own. But Michigan's last turnover was to end the game. So honestly, this could have been a 45-13 game in favor of USC. Now, Notre Dame continues to look better and better despite their losses. Miami and Texas A&M. Right now, those are 2 top 5 teams in the country. The margin of defeat combined was 4 points, excuse me. So incredible showing for Notre Dame in those games against top 5 teams. Since then, beat Purdue, Arkansas, Boise State, and NC State. Things were a little greasy at times there, especially with Purdue, but they were down their best corner, Leonard Moore. The main thing I think you can look at recently is, 1, they get back Leonard Moore. Their secondary's played a lot better. 2, they're starting 2 freshmen and 2 sophomores in the secondary. That's a very young unit. The worst, assuming these guys are actually good, which they're elite recruits, so we'll make that assumption. The best time to play Notre Dame is week 1 and 2 if you're going to play a secondary that looks like that, a very young secondary overall. So I'm not surprised to see them improving. Yes, the competition's weaker, but holding CJ Bailey for NC State to 7 points, that's still good. They held that Arkansas offense, which has continuously been scoring points. Their problem is defense. They held them to 13 points. So it's been a better showing for this Notre Dame defense, which I think is important here. They're a lot healthier too. When you look at their injury report, some of them are on offense now, really. The only defender is Devontae Smith, and I'm not sure he'd start anyway at this point. With Notre Dame, it's Jaden Greathouse and Ashton Craig, an offensive lineman, that are hurt. For USC, they lost both their starting running backs, Waymon Jordan and Eli Sanders, in their last game. They also did not have their center, Killian O'Connor. His replacement's actually been better. They didn't have left tackle Elijah Page either. He's been a big loss. So in this game, let's start with USC and move to the Notre Dame defense. Mike has been much better than I thought. His problem at UNLV and at times last year when we saw him, turnover-worthy plays. He only has 5 of them. He's also only taken 2 sacks. The mobility has not really shown itself via the run game, but he's navigated the pocket with it. And his completion percentage is 71.5. His yards per attempt is 10.7. He's had a good year, even against weaker competition, but the Michigan showing was positive for him. He's working with really good skill players. Mekhi Lemon, up to 682 yards. I mean, he's an absolute stud. He might be a first-round draft pick. Lake McCree and Jacoby Lane fill the gaps. The rushing attack is also top 20. There's going to be a drop-off without Waymon Jordan, without Eli Sanders. But, man, King Miller, in very limited work, averages 10.7 yards per carry. So maybe there's not going to be a drop-off. I don't know. The infrastructure is pretty good. Offensive line is banged up. We mentioned O'Connor and Page. But honestly, the backup for O'Connor has been better. The real problem now is just Ben Wellos has been a problem regardless. And then Tauanu, the replacement for Elijah Page, he's been a problem too. Page is going to return sooner rather than later. I thought there was a chance he played last week, but he did not. And even with the backups, this unit only allowed 14 pressures to Illinois and 5 to Michigan. 5 to Michigan. Michigan is a good pass rush. So they've played better than I thought. I don't believe this unit will ever be like top 20, but firmly like a top 50, top 45 unit. USC can handle most defensive lines. And Notre Dame's defensive line has not been fantastic this year. There's a lot of rotating to keep players fresh. They end up 32nd in run defense, 73rd in pass rush. Expecting players like Botello and Burnham to play a little better down the stretch, and they have against weaker teams. We mentioned it at the top. The secondary's gotten a lot better. Part of that just returning Leonard Moore. The other part, the freshmen are playing better. The sophomores are playing better. Tay Johnson and Dallas Golden are now starting. Everything is improving for Notre Dame's defense, and we knew that that would be the case after their 2 top 5 opponents, weeks 1 and 3. On the Notre Dame offense, CJ Carr has a 64.5% completion percentage. He has regressed. Not by a lot, but he's missed some very clear throws. Saw that in games like Boise State. He is still averaging 10 yards per attempt. He has 10 big-time throws, 6 turnover-worthy plays, and he's only taken 5 sacks. Good functional mobility for him. The skill position players don't wow you, at least at receiver, quite like USC's do. Greathouse has a hamstring injury. I'm not sure if we see him, but it's been Faison, Raridon at tight end, Malachi Fields all above 300 yards with Will Pauling filling in some of the gaps. Notre Dame wants to beat you via the run. Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price have been awesome. They might be the best 1-2 punch in the country. They're also, I think the O-line is better than around like 72nd. That's where they are in pass blocking, 73rd in run blocking. They've just played a really hard schedule, really good defensive lines. A&M and Miami have elite defensive lines. The only problem for me right now is that Emil Wagner and Garby Lambert have been liabilities, and now you lose your center, Ashton Craig. So where does this leave the Notre Dame offensive line? I think it'll be fine, but there's at least question marks with this unit. They're facing a USC defense, which I think is well coached with D'Anton Lynn. We saw that with the game plan against Michigan. That was a great idea to try to test them and force them to throw over the top, which they were unable to do. But they've still only played one top 50 offense. That was Illinois, and they got annihilated in that game. 12.3 yards per attempt, 5.1 yards per carry. And even like Bryce Underwood and Childs for Michigan State had some situational success. The strength of this unit is their secondary with Kamari Ramsey and Bishop Fitzgerald. Now, just a note, Kamari Ramsey didn't play in the Illinois game. I'm not sure it would have mattered, but just a note there. Otherwise, the edge group is okay with Lucas and Fountain. My major concern is the interior. Now you're matching up against Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. Really, if you hope to win this matchup, I think you're banking on that offensive line being more of a problem for Notre Dame than people might believe at first, considering the limitations with Wagner and co, and then the injury up front. We show value on USC. I took it at 8.5. It is moved to 9. And now that I do the full, like we took this on Sunday night or something, showing value on it, we make this closer to a field goal. But diving into the stylistics of the game, I'm not sure this favors USC. I'm still not fully bought in on their run defense being completely shored up after the Illinois game. And Notre Dame is a team that can run the ball for better or worse. And then the Notre Dame defense, USC is going to test them for sure, but they've played a lot better, getting the right players in the field. And then the important experience for that young secondary seems to be benefiting them as they play more and more games. So I'm not sure. I wouldn't recommend betting this now. I'm holding a USC ticket. I'm going to see where it goes before deciding whether to buy out or not. Maybe eat a little negative money, but we'll see where it goes. Very fun game overall. Utah BYU, another big game in the Big 12. Utah dealing with some injuries in the back end, especially Nate Ritchie and Rabbit Evans, but overall pretty healthy team. BYU is a lot of injuries. Sion Moa, backup running back. On defense, they have a lot of players questionable. Anisi Purcell at defensive tackle, Jack Kelly at linebacker, Tommy Process at defensive back, and Raider Demouni at safety, all not sure on their status. Utah's played one tough game this year. Just kind of sad to see how the schedule's played out. You face backup quarterbacks against West Virginia and Arizona State, and Jeff Sims, man. 3.3 yards per attempt. Really? We're doing the Jeff Sims thing again? So obviously Arizona State didn't have Sam Levitt and scored 10 points. The only game they played that was a competent opponent was Texas Tech, and they got the doors blown off. And Baron Morton didn't even play a full game. They held Devon Dampier to 4.3 yards per attempt. He had 4 turnovers. I mean, we need to see better games for Utah. It's not like BYU's been better, though. They played the same West Virginia team. Their closer games, they played an unbelievably easy non-con. In conference so far, they played Colorado, won by 3 points. They had a 30% post-game win expectancy. And my goodness, Colorado can't get out of their own way. Then they play Arizona to overtime. Now that game, 33-27, 88% post-game win expectancy. I think really most of the points Arizona scored were off BYU errors too. They had a turnover on down at their own 38. Arizona kicked a field goal. BYU missed a field goal. BYU threw an interception at the end of the half. There are a couple errors for Arizona, though, too. They had an interception at the BYU 2-yard line. So, I mean, this kind of goes both ways. One interesting game plan for Utah against Arizona State. Clearly didn't think this team was live at all because almost every single offensive play, Utah had a 6th offensive lineman on the field. I was looking at the player personnel, and I see, like, really limited snaps for all the receivers except Davis. And then I'm like, all right, maybe they played a lot of 12 personnel. Really limited snaps for tight end. And then you dive into the snap counts. You're like, they used a 6th offensive lineman that often? Just really wild. So they're doing weird stuff. They use defenders on offense all the time. You'll see Smith Snowden, Beanie, Lander Barton. They all play offense too. It's weird. And it's a funky offense. It's the old New Mexico offense. Obviously, Dampier is the quarterback, the old New Mexico QB. He's the team's leading rusher at this point. As a passer, he's been somewhat limited. He has 5 turnover-worthy plays to 4 big-time throws, but they're not really trying to throw the ball unless they have to. And he's efficient. 71% completion percentage for him, and he's only taken 3 sacks. You're not getting a lot of negative plays, and if you can extend drives, this Utah team's going to score on you. Basically, all the negative plays came against Texas Tech, too. The skill players aren't great for Utah. At least I think they've just done so many weird things. You have Wayshawn Parker and Nakari Rogers. They're pretty good rushers. The receiving game is just super limited. Ryan Davis and Dallin Bentley are your top 2, Bentley playing tight end. But your old line is good. The only unit that gave them trouble was that awesome Texas Tech defensive line. They only allowed 8 pressures in that game, too. Now, they did really, really struggle in the run game, so that's at least noteworthy. But Spencer Fano and Caleb Lumu are going to get drafted as both are tackles. The biggest concern is the interior. Can BYU stand up to this? Probably not, in my opinion. I've been a BYU seller all season long. I have their win total under 8.5, so I'm sweating that out. But they have not faced an offense ranked higher than 88th. I mean, they've only faced one higher than 88th, I should say. That was Arizona, and Arizona's 52nd. They have not played a top 50 offense this year. They allowed 5 yards per carry to Arizona, but they did a good job against Fafita. I mean, the players all look awesome because they played a bunch of bad offenses. So, we thought their secondary would be a concern. And Evan Johnson and Falatau Sautuala have played well in the secondary. John Tomopeau, I believe is how you say that. I practiced that in the offseason too, so shame on me for forgetting. Tomopeau at defensive tackle has been good. The linebackers are good, but there's so many cracks for this defensive line that you can poke to. They're 77th in pass rush. I don't think they've faced a decent QB yet outside of maybe Fafita. I think Utah moves the ball on this team. For BYU, so much of their season was going to come down to how Bear Bachmeier played with Jake Retzlaff getting in trouble. And he's played well. There are still some of the freshman mistakes. He has 6 turnover-worthy plays to 5 big-time throws, but he is very mobile. He's only taken 5 sacks. And his completion percentage, yards per attempt, both could be higher because his receivers have a 9% drop rate. And that's just it with the skill players. I think you have 3 good players. LJ Martin's been great at running back. Chase Roberts and Parker Kingston have been fine at receiver. But you're still missing guys like JoJo Phillips. They had a lot of players transfer out of this unit. So it's not the most scary offense, at least among skill players that you could face. And then I still have questions with the offensive line. They have not faced a top 50 defensive line yet. They faced a couple really questionable units, and this was projected to be a bottom 3 Big 12 offensive line heading into the season. They're rotating both guard spots, and I'm not sure what that is going to look like when they play better teams. Outside of the guards, they've actually been pretty good with Mitchell, Jada, and Gentry, but just a lot of questions with BYU considering the expectation versus what they've played. Meanwhile, on defense, Utah is certainly disappointed. They've only played 1 top 75 offense. That was Texas Tech. They got absolutely demolished in that game. They have 1 good edge rusher. That's John Henry Daly. They should have more. I mean, there are more names to this unit. They just have not lived up to expectation. And in the secondary, Jackson Beanie has been the only one who's really stood up efficiency-wise. This team is 95th in coverage and 58th in run defense. I still think that might be enough against BYU. But at the end of the day, I don't think people realize the cracks that both these defenses have at this point. And Utah's 61st in pace. This is still an adjustment, I think, for most people. This is the old New Mexico offense. BYU's 121st in pace, but we can go back to previous seasons with them. They're typically not playing this slowly. Part of the reason you get the pace well below average is this team has just been beating the snot out of teams. So they have the lead. Outside of the overtime game and the Colorado game, they've not needed to press at all. And we saw them jump last game to so right now they're 28.9 in seconds per play. They jumped to 24.3 in their last game. I think there's a real chance this team plays a little more up-tempo in competitive games. And they're an underdog here. This is a 3.5-point spread of 49 total. We took an over, expect the Utah offense to do a lot of creative, unique things, besting the BYU defense. And then there are enough cracks on the Utah defense where I think BYU still has success scoring the ball. Plus, in my opinion, only room for the pace to increase in this game. Missouri-Auburn, really fun game here. It's currently a 2-point spread. I bet this at plus 2.5 on Sunday night. The total is 43.5. We still show some value on the minus 2.5. Obviously, it's losing value rapidly, but just before we get into the breakdown, you can still take this. We make it closer to -7. We talked about Missouri a little bit in relation to Alabama. That team had a 72% post-game win expectancy, and we went through all the stuff they did to lose the game themselves. Other than that, they haven't played the toughest schedule. They beat Kansas convincingly, and it could have been worse for Kansas, that is. Missouri had a fumble 6 in the game, and then they crushed South Carolina, a game that honestly could have been worse. South Carolina had negative rushing yards in the contest. So it's been a great run off for Missouri. This team is awesome. On the Auburn side, they've lived dangerously, largely because of offensive struggles. They lose to Georgia. We went over that game. The goal line play, they should have been up 17-0 instead. Georgia gets the ball and they lose. They lose to Texas A&M by 6 points. That game should have been disastrous for them. The average margin of defeat was 21.5. Texas A&M missed 2 field goals. They threw an interception at the Auburn 21. They also had 13 penalties in a game that crushed a lot of their drives. They got dominated by Texas A&M, even though it doesn't look like it. They also lost by a touchdown to Oklahoma. The best win they have right now is Baylor. And really the limitations with Auburn come offensively. Jackson Arnold, he's up to a 64% completion, but 6 yards per attempt. He has 2 big-time throws, 7 turnover-worthy plays, but the real problem is he has taken 22 sacks. The pressure rate's 32%. That's high, but the pressure-to-sack ratio is also 32%. That's astronomical. And now he's not getting a lot of help. They just had Damari Alston leave the team, so it's going to fall on Jeremiah Cobb. But the receivers have been disappointing. 5-star Cam Coleman has not played well. Eric Singleton, the Georgia Tech transfer, has not played well. They are 117th in receiving efficiency, and that is isolating receiver play. How much separation are you creating? Are you dropping passes? I don't know, man. Like at some point, we really got to ask if Hugh Freeze and the staff is maximizing players like Cam Coleman. I don't know. The offensive line is a little unsettled. They keep insisting on getting Xavier Miller on the field. He got hurt, so coming back and mixing him in has been a little weird. They did lose Jeremiah Wright in their last game, so you might even just be looking at Miller playing full-time now. I don't know. The offensive line has been a little unsettled with the current rotation. They've been good, though. The only player who's bad is Chaplin. He's just below average, and they're still 67th in pass blocking, 28th in run blocking. But ultimately, the only other player with an injury on that side of the ball is Horatio Fields. It's still probably going to be tough to score on Missouri's defense. That is fully healthy. They're top 10 in every metric except coverage. But man, this pass rush is fearsome with Zion Young and Damon Wilson. The secondary is playing better, and they did a good job against Ty Simpson, 6.5 yards per attempt. That was with Marvin Burks getting a targeting immediately in the game. Catalan had a great showing. The only player who was a little bit questionable was Toriano Pride, and we saw him soft bench for Dre Norwood. So I'm not sure they're going to be able to have success against a Missouri defense that strength is up front. Their weakness, if you want to call it that, is over the top. And Jackson Arnold just can't feel pressure in the pocket. He's going to be under it. And he's had a lot of trouble with these receivers. On the other side, there are some injuries for Missouri to at least note. Caden Green came back from injury. I thought he looked okay. Kevin Coleman in and out of the game with an ankle. We'll see if he goes. But Auburn just lost Kay and Lee again at defensive back. So kind of a banged up unit there. We'll do the Auburn defense first. I love their edge rushing group. They've not lived up to expectation, but Kedrick Falk's been fine. Kieran Crawford, even Robert Woodyard at linebacker and Bobby Jamison Travis at defensive tackle. They've been fine there. They're 135th in coverage. They've routinely used 10 defensive backs. They cannot stop rotating. They cannot figure out who is the best player for this unit. And their opposing quarterbacks are continually having success. The only one recently they've kind of stopped is Gunnar Stockton. So you can throw the ball on this team. Ropai Buell has been awesome to start the year, 72.5% completion, 7.8 yards per attempt. He does have 6 turnover-worthy plays, but been very unlucky. All of them have been converted to interceptions. He has taken 15 sacks. That's a little high, but he's mobile, and overall, I think Pry Buell has been a positive for this team. His skill players are much better than expected. Ahmad Hardy, there's a real question Is he the best running back in the country? He didn't have his best game against Alabama, but that's not the team you would have your best game against. He's at 6.8 yards per carry, and he was getting tough yards in that game. Kevin Coleman's been a great transfer addition. Even when he went down, Donovan Olugbode, I forget how to say that, the freshman, the strong recruit, he had an awesome game with some big catches against Alabama. That's a good receiving unit. The offensive line's been better than expected too. They really have one question. It's Curtis Piegler, but getting back Caden Green, that now gives them a duo at tackle, which is one of the best in the SEC. People aren't talking about it, but Trost and Green are awesome. They've not really faced an elite pass rush. Even Bama has been a disappointment. So maybe there's a little room for this unit to regress, but pretty good unit overall. Auburn will test them. The best part of Auburn's defense is up front. So it's kind of a matchup on paper that you think might be able to be exploitable for Auburn. I just don't think it's enough. 62nd in pass rush, 11th in run defense, the 135th in coverage, a weak link that probably does them in even at home in this game. Missouri's just a better team. We took them plus a 2.5, minus 2.5 still shows value. This was probably just the most mispriced line coming into the week. LSU Vanderbilt. This game has a spread of 2.5. The over-under is 49. So in this contest, Vanderbilt's off a bye. LSU's off a South Carolina win, a greasy one at that. They are a little banged up. Their best receiver, Aaron Anderson, went down. Paul Mobang on the offensive line's been hurt. He doesn't matter at all. And then Gabriel Relaford on defense. Vanderbilt should be healthy. They were pretty healthy heading into their bye, and now they're coming out of it. LSU's wins have aged poorly. Clemson looks atrocious. Louisiana Tech, they only won 23-7. Florida, 20-10. Florida just lost again, so it's kind of been a mess there. And then this team lost to Ole Miss, 24-13. They barely beat South Carolina, 20-10. And LSU lost the turnover battle, 3-2 in that game. LSU, I think, is just really struggling to find an identity. They started using a lot of 12 personnel in their last game with both Bauer, Sharp, and Trey'Dez Green. Now, Green is kind of a glorified receiver anyway. But it was a good game plan on defense for LSU. That's kind of how they're having to win games. They're another team that barely used nickel at all. They brought in a third linebacker, took their extra corner off the field, and dared Sellers to throw. And I don't think it's Sellers. It's mainly his infrastructure is so bad. When you force South Carolina into straight drop back game, it's a complete disaster for them. And honestly, South Carolina did themselves no favors. They missed a field goal. They had an interception, or they fumbled on their own 17. That was an LSU field goal. They threw an interception at their own 40. LSU gave that one right back. But LSU had some struggles of their own. They fumbled in the South Carolina one. It went out of the end zone. They threw an interception at midfield and another one at the South Carolina 9. So even though it was ugly, LSU probably could have won by more. Vanderbilt's last game was against Bama. We talked about that one already. It was closer than the score indicates, but 2 red zone turnovers really did Vanderbilt in a contest that was very close. So LSU mentioned offensively, Nussmeier not having his best season. He's hurt to some degree. They won't talk about it. But his receivers haven't done him any favors. 9.5% drop rate is a good unit on paper. I mean, they just need to kind of trim the fat here. We've been saying this for weeks. Chris Hilton should not get a snap. And now they lost Anderson. I mean, you should probably be using Barian Brown and, I don't know, maybe Kyle Parker, and then play 12 every play. Use Trey'Dez Green. He is the biggest mismatch you have in your favor on your team. Use Bauer Sharp. I mean, like, the receivers aren't cutting it, man. I don't know what to tell you. They're 70th in efficiency. And they're not good at running the ball either. They're 122nd. Caden Durham, this is isolating him, and he's been hurt, so maybe that's the answer. But isolating him, not even considering the offensive line. They've had a bad run game. And then the offensive line doesn't do a lot to help them. I mean, they have not faced a pass rush better than 41. And they faced 3 pass rushes outside the top 90. So for them to be 121st in run blocking, 62nd in pass blocking, this is a mess. Weston Davis has been downright horrific. He's awful. Cone Eccles and Paul Mobenga, whoever they played at that guard position, Mobenga's currently hurt, they've been horrible. The only player who's solidly above average is the Virginia Tech transfer, Braylon Moore. This is a bad offensive line. So it gets Nussmeier in trouble. The run game has nowhere to go. It should come as no surprise this LSU offense has been stuck in the mud. Now they're facing Vanderbilt's defense, which is actually pretty good. They're 38th. They've only played one offense ranked higher than 89th, though. That was Alabama, who ended up with 10 yards per pass attempt, 11 yards per pass attempt. They did do a good job with the run game, though, so that's at least worth mentioning. There are some good players. I mean, their safeties are good with Fontenette and Hurd. They're pretty good off the edge with Sidnor and Miles Capers. The LB room is pretty good, too, with Longwell and Patterson. I don't think it's any ease scoring on Vanderbilt, especially when this LSU team had trouble scoring on offense, or I guess I should say defenses that are worse, like Louisiana Tech. So on the Vanderbilt side, Diego Pavia just went superhero, tried to get it done. It was not his best game by any stretch, maybe his worst game. He still has a 71.5% completion percentage, 8.8 yards per attempt, 12 Big Ten throws, 8 turnover-worthy plays. He's only taken 4 sacks. The turnover-worthy plays come in hero mode against Alabama. He made some questionable decisions early. But if you can remove that from Pavia's game, which we haven't really seen it before, it was just maybe the bright lights in front of him. I don't know. We have a long sample of Pavia. He's not generally playing like that. The pass game and the receiving game are awesome this year. Cedric Alexander's at 6.4 yards per carry. Pavia is a great 1-2 punch with him, 5.9. Stowers is their tight end. He leads the team in receiving. And then you get Junior Sherrill and Trey Richardson filling in the gaps. The offensive line is bad, but honestly, it kind of comes down to Isaiah Glass at tackle being one of the worst offensive linemen in the SEC. Bryce Henderson's not great on the other side, but Glass flat out needs to be replaced. Replacement level players generally are better than Glass. So I'm very interested to see if they decide to make a move there at some point. His problems have led them to rank 118th in pass blocking, 55th in run blocking. If they did not have a signal caller as mobile as Pavia, this could be an utter disaster for this team. But ultimately, they're able to run the ball still, and Pavia, he can navigate pressure with the best of them. LSU's defense has regressed since we saw those amazing starts. And honestly, it kind of just is, it got in context. Like, Clemson's offense stinks. Florida's offense is very limited. They lose to Ole Miss, and then they played South Carolina. Like, they just have not played a lot of good offenses. Ole Miss battered this defense. Otherwise, every other team has some sort of flaw. So LSU has a good defense. I'm not sure they are an awesome defense. Their strength is certainly coverage. Mansour Delane and AJ Halsey have been awesome. PJ Woodland's not far behind. But up front, these players have regressed. Harold Perkins is playing below average now, mathematically, analytically, call it what you want. He had a great start. Part of that was Clemson was just leaving him unblocked. Now he's been victimized. Your edge rushers like Patrick Payton, we're starting to realize why he was a Florida State cast-off. It has not been a good unit. They're 54th in run defense, 71st in pass rush. This is solidly average. I think Vanderbilt can score the ball on this team. And if Vanderbilt can get some stops against a lackluster LSU offense, mathematically, we just make this team as a better team. I mean, currently it's 2.5. That suggests this should be a pick 'em on a neutral field. I don't even agree with that. Like, Vanderbilt is straight up the better team. We make this closer to -7. With no issues playing the 2.5. I would guess there's a pretty decent chance it moves. So if you want to go, now is probably the time. On the total, show some value towards the under. Pace should be very bad in this game. LSU is slowed to a snail's pace, and Vanderbilt already was playing that way. They've done that through the last couple of years. Texas Tech, Arizona State. No need to spend a lot of time on this game. It's a quarterback injury game. Baron Morton is day-to-day. I think he goes. Skylar Gill-Howard also got hurt on the defensive line for Texas Tech. Arizona State has a lot of injuries. Sam Levitt is hurt. He was in a boot. He has some broken ribs or something wrong with his ribs, something like that. Kyson Brown started at running back. And then on the offensive line, they lost their center, Ben Coleman. I don't know if he plays. And then Josh Atkins only played limited snaps in his return from injury, which was weird. On defense, Xavier Alford and Zyrus Fiasu are both injured at linebacker and defensive back. Texas Tech they've beaten up on some easy teams. They're non-con. Pine Bluff, Kent State, and Oregon State, very easy. But then they slaughter Utah with a backup quarterback for half the game. They slaughtered Houston in a game where they tried to kick 7 field goals, and they only made 5 of them. Couldn't finish drives. And then they slaughtered Kansas 42-17 with a backup quarterback again. This team is on a warpath. Meanwhile, Arizona State, regression firmly hitting this team. They lose to Mississippi State, where they were a favorite. We thought that would be the case. We bet Mississippi State, but still clearly not living up to expectation when not only do you not cover, but you don't win. They beat Baylor by 3 points in a game. They had a 31% post-game win expectancy. Extremely lucky to get a win there. They beat TCU by 3 points in a game where TCU blew a 17-point lead. That wasn't as crazy. They kind of deserved to lose. And then their last game is a useless data point because the drop-off from Sam Leavitt to Jeff Sims is enormous. So they get blown out in that game. Starting with Texas Tech, Baron Martin is, I think, going to play as nearly 10 yards per pass attempt, only 4 turnover-worthy plays. His main problem is he just takes too many risks on the ground and he keeps getting hurt. His wide receivers have a 9% drop rate, so honestly, there's some room for success if he can. I mean, it's not him if his receivers can just catch the ball. The drop-off here is not steep, so you go from him to potentially Will Hammond. Will Hammond, first of all, is a better runner. Second of all, he has a 66% completion, 7.2 yards per attempt, only 2 turnover-worthy plays. He doesn't take a lot of sacks. So Will Hammond, the drop-off is there, but it is not. We make this about 1 point. This is not a steep drop-off. And the skill players are awesome. I mean, Dickey, Williams, their runners are fantastic. Caleb Douglas, Coy Aiken, Terrence Carter at tight end, Reggie Virgil. They all played above expectation. The offensive line has played above expectation. They haven't played a lot of good teams, but against Utah, pretty decent pass rush, 12 pressures. That's good. The only player who's been below average is Will Jados, which makes sense. He's a MAC transfer. But now you play Arizona State's defense. This unit, they've played a good amount of teams that have good offenses, but they just allowed Devin Dampier 10.5 yards per attempt. Utah rushed for 7 yards per carry. And they just had no answer. Again, Utah played 6 offensive linemen almost every single play, and then they ran the ball down Arizona's throat. Texas Tech is a phenomenal rushing team. What do we think is going to happen here? They've also gotten beat through the air at times. Like, you can throw the ball over this team. They have 3 good players, Keith Abney, Jordan Crook, and Prince Dorba. Their second best defensive back, Rodney Bymage, doesn't even play a full-time role. So there's questions with this Arizona State defense. Meanwhile, you have Sam Leavitt. He's been very questionable this season, up and down across the board. 62.5% completions below average. He's taken 12 sacks. His pressure to sack ratio is 21.5%. That's below average. He has 11 big-time throws and 8 turnover-worthy plays. He's just taking more chances. And then the drop-off here is astronomical. Jeff Sims has a 47% completion percentage for 3.3 yards per attempt while taking 5 sacks against Utah. That's a huge drop-off. And he's played a lot. We know he's bad. The skill players are just flat out not as good with this team either. You have Raleek Brown. He's been fine in the run game, but they do not have anything outside of Jordan Tyson. They're 112th in receiving efficiency with the best receiver in the country. Like Jalen Moss, he came back from injury, didn't work. Walk-on Asubio, didn't work. Don't want to play Asubio? Let's try 12. Didn't work. They just don't have any good receivers, man. And the offensive line, they played a ton of weak defensive lines. They just allowed 19 pressures to Utah. I mean, they're now facing the number 1 pass rush efficiency in the country. And they have 2 potential injuries. Ben Coleman going down at center and Josh Atkins still being limited. Let's just play this hypothetical. If neither of those guys play, they have 1 above average offensive lineman. That's their tackle, Max Ahianaker. Disaster. And then Texas Tech's defense. So Gil Howard goes down. They were already rotating 3 D tackles. Lee Hunter and A.J. Holmes are awesome. Romello Height and David Bailey are incredible off the edge. The secondary is the bigger concern, and that's honestly kind of just because they've been untested. Teams can't get passes off against this defensive line, and not to mention the linebackers are awesome too with Jacob Rodriguez. We laid a minus 10.5. I'm only guessing it was down there because of injury stuff. We make it beyond 14. 12 is completely fine. I'm playing Texas Tech until they show us a reason not to be played, which right now, that has not been even close to the case. Texas A&M, Arkansas in the SEC. This game has a 7.5-point spread in favor of A&M, a 62 total. A&M has to hit the road. I will say Arkansas looked a lot better in their last contest against Tennessee. And even then, they 3 turnovers against Tennessee. Like, my goodness, what are you doing? We talked about that game a lot. Prior, they lost to Notre Dame and Memphis and Ole Miss. So it was good to see them right the ship. We know this team is more talented than what they were doing under Sam Pittman. Just crazy to see the fruits in 1 week with Petrino, I guess, leading a complete interim staff. A&M's undefeated. They've been awesome. They've answered every call. The only, I guess, qualm I have with their game when we run these in the back end, looking for post-game win expectancy, average margin of victory, it's basically an expectation. Did you reach it or did you not reach it? In every game this year, they hadn't reached expectation for one reason or another, despite winning games until Florida. This is the first time we saw them absolutely demolish a team, and it could have been worse. And missed a field goal. They threw an interception at the Florida 21. They could have won this game 40-17, maybe worse. This is a great team. And injury-wise, Le'Veon Moss probably not going to play in this game at running back. That's a deep position. Scooby Williams, their stud linebacker, did return from injury, but he only got off 10 snaps, which is a question. For Arkansas, it was just Jaylen Brown. I'm not worried about that receiver position. Marcel Reed, he has a 59.5% completion, 8.7 yards per attempt. He does have 7 turnover-worthy plays, but he's only taken 5 sacks. So even that, the negative plays, they're not really a large part of his game. His numbers would be better if his receivers didn't have a 10% drop rate. For as good as Mario Craver and Casey Concepcion have been, honestly, the answer is not even those guys, really. Some of the drops have come from Terry Bussey and Asheville Bethel Roman, however you say that. So Reed should have better stats. And when you throw to Craver and Concepcion, good things happen. Just isolate them. Maybe play more 12 with your tight ends, get them involved. And the run game, they're only 89th in efficiency. I think some of this is like Moss clearly has some issues health-wise, but Ruben Owens is at 5.8 yards per carry, former 5-star. He should be fine in relief. And this O-line has been completely fine. I had a little bit higher expectations for this team. 7th in pass blocking, 64th in run blocking. Just thought they'd be a little better in the run game. They basically returned everyone from this unit. So no real surprises. They've been good. I thought they'd be great, but no complaints here. Arkansas's defense is atrocious. They've faced 4 top 40 offenses, yes, but they've just gotten thoroughly dominated in every game. They have 2 good players. I mean, they've got Julian Neal and Quincy Rhodes. And avoid those 2 players, you're going to score 45 points on Arkansas, just the way it is. So can Arkansas keep pace? Taylon Green's been awesome, man. The only problem with his game is 8 big-time throws to 12 turnover-worthy plays. And when you're the best player on a team that is at a talent deficit weekly, you can excuse some of that away. Like, he needs to play hero ball if they want to win games. It just kind of is what it is. The run game is very good for this team. Mike Washington and Taylon Green is the 1-2 punch. And Washington fumbled away one of their games against Memphis. I mean, like, they've lived dangerously, and they're going to continue to do so. The receivers have been impressive. Omega Blake, 464 yards. Somehow this offense is continually turning low-level players, especially receivers, into studs. So credit to Petrino there. Offensive line, they've only faced 1 pass rush ranked higher than 73rd. They allowed 16 pressures immediately. That was against Tennessee, who has a great pass rush unit. So I don't know. It's a remade group. I mean, they brought in a bunch of transfers. I guess the only one who's technically been a liability is UCF transfer Caden Kittler. So decent offensive line. But A&M's defense is awesome. They're going to have a lot of trouble against this unit, especially up front. The edge defenders are fantastic with Cassius Howell and Dan Hayes. The secondary has gotten better, too. I mean, you return players like Bryce Anderson from injury after he was stretchered off. They're 30th in coverage. It's going to be a tough task facing this A&M team. Mathematically, we make this inside 7, just barely. So that's technically where the math leans. I can't bet this on the Arkansas side. It's a Texas A&M or pass for me. I could be tempted if this gets down to 7 to play an A&M. Don't love the road spot. If you like narratives and stuff, it's definitely a sleepy look-ahead style game. But, man, the reason we show value in Arkansas is this team does have talent. Pittman just failed to maximize it. So we'll hold off for now. We'll wait and see where this goes. I'm personally interested in disagreeing with the model and playing an A&M. Just not a fan of Arkansas. Oklahoma, South Carolina. 5-point spread in favor of the Sooners at 43 total in this game. I lean towards an over more than anything else because pace is very good in this game. Oklahoma 28th, South Carolina 55th. Both these teams offensively challenged to some degree. Injuries, a lot of O-linemen for both teams. Logan Howland and Derek Simmons for Oklahoma. Cedric Surratt and Kason Henry for South Carolina. Defensively, South Carolina's Brandon Cisse went down too. Oklahoma just lost to Texas. They played a pretty easy schedule until then. Like, their marquee wins, Michigan, clearly we know they're limited at this point. They can't throw the ball. Auburn, same thing. Jackson Arnold can't throw the ball. So those are the 2 best wins. They won by 11 points and 7 points. And then they lose to Texas in a game where they just got utterly dominated. And part of that because Mateer threw 3 picks. That basically decided the game. South Carolina just very clearly limited T. People wanted to anoint them after they beat Virginia Tech, which is aged like sour milk. They get annihilated by Vanderbilt. They lose to Missouri in a game that could have been worse. Then they beat Kentucky, followed up that with a loss to LSU. With Oklahoma, I don't know what to make of Mateer, man. It was his first. That was by far the toughest defense he's played. He played awful in that contest. He's still very mobile. He doesn't take a ton of sacks. And his passing efficiency is solid outside of the 8 turnover-worthy plays. You're trying to balance the injury versus the competition level. We never thought he was quite as good as like the Heisman hype he was getting after some of the early wins, but man, it was tough to see the last game. He's just not working with a lot, man. This team has no run game. Jaden Ott's been a complete and utter disaster. If there was cuts in college football, he probably would have been cut by now. Torrey Blaylock's at 4.3 yards per carry. He's decent. I mean, your receivers are just not very good. Satina for Arkansas, he was a rotational player over there. He's now come over. Jaron Knox, converted defender, playing tight end. Deion Burks, I mean, people loved him at Purdue, failing to realize, like, Purdue stinks, and he was a decent player. So, yeah, he got 900 targets. He's at 339 yards right now. And then Keontae Lewis, a Wisconsin cast-off who had to transfer down, is now back up in the SEC. It's just like, this is not a talented receiver room. Flat out, like, this isn't Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard. Like, this is just not a very good group. It's decent at best. And the offensive line has problems. Now that they have some injuries, getting thinner at tackle could be an issue because the 2 biggest liabilities were the guards. Febechi Nwaiwu and Heath Lozada. So now if you're removing some tackles from the mix, this could be a problem. They've played some good defensive lines, and they've played better than I thought they would. So got to give them credit. This is not a very talented unit. I mean, outside of like Fasusi, who's a freshman, like they've had to play a lot of G5 transfers and stuff. I could see worse days being ahead for this offensive line. And we ended up betting Texas in the last game. So this is not a new opinion for me. I mean, you can watch the preseason videos. You'll know that I'm not the biggest fan of Oklahoma's infrastructure. Defensively, they're pretty good. I do like this defense, but let's do South Carolina's defense first because we just talked about Oklahoma's offense. This South Carolina defense, you can definitely beat. Now, they've got a decent pass rush. It hasn't been quite as good as last year because they remove a lot of players that go to the NFL. And Wari, the defensive line has been gutted. So Dylan Stewart, he's getting more attention this year, and he's not playing as well. Their pass rush comes in 54th. Their run defense is 35th. But if you can throw the ball, you're going to beat South Carolina. They're 100th in coverage, and they just lost Brandon Cisse. I don't know if he's going to play in this game, but he is their best corner by far. If he is out, that could be a huge issue for this team. So you can beat South Carolina's defense. I think Oklahoma will. On the other side, Lenora Sellers is not working with anything. He's somehow still at a 63% completion, 8.7 yards per attempt. He's taken 17 sacks, but the pressure rate is 43%. Nearly half his dropbacks, he's under pressure. His wide receivers have a 10% drop rate. They just don't have any good players, man. Like, people were coming out of the woodwork screaming for free Rasul Faison, wearing T-shirts, doing all this nonsense. He sucks. He's a G5 transfer playing running back in the SEC. What did you expect to happen? Matt Fuller has been better than him. And then you actually have highly recruited receivers, Van Drevis, Jacobs, and Nick Harbor. Like, sometimes you just miss these guys. I don't know if it's coaching, you can't develop them, or if they're truly just not as talented as their recruiting rankings, because this group is wildly underachieved. They don't have any good skill players. They have a horrible offensive line. They have Josiah Thompson, their crown jewel of last year's class. They started him immediately as a freshman. He's trash. I don't know if they can't develop him or if they played him too young. He didn't get the development time. He's one of the worst linemen in the country at tackle. By far, outside of like maybe Isaiah Glass for Vanderbilt, he might be the worst tackle in the SEC. He is atrocious. They only have 2 above average players on the offensive line. One of them just got hurt. Surratt, I don't know if he plays in this game. Kason Henry is their best lineman by far. He hasn't played in a few weeks. This unit is atrocious. Sellers, I hate to say it because I love when guys stay at their colleges of choice. If he wanted a real shot this year, he should have left. This is just an untenable situation. And they're facing Oklahoma's defense. Like, my goodness, I don't know if you can find over-unders on this, but how many sacks is our Mason Thomas going to have? What is David Stone, Grayson Halton going to do to this offensive line? The one question I think you can poke with Oklahoma, it's not going to matter in this game. Those guys got beat by Texas. They got thoroughly dominated by the Texas offensive line, which hadn't played that well. So against better teams, which they certainly, this is the easiest game Oklahoma has the rest of the way, which should tell you something about their schedule. It's very hard. They're going to win in this game, but getting beat by Texas, maybe it was an off day. Sometimes teams have that. But the secondary is also getting healthier. I think that's the biggest question. The two Bowens are back, but I don't think South Carolina is going to have the time to throw over the top. I would lean towards an over, but I have enough worries about the South Carolina offense being able to move the ball at all, where it's probably just going to be a stay away. You could maybe talk me into Oklahoma. I have the under in South Carolina's win total. That is looking very good right now. So hopefully no upsets. It's a road spot for Oklahoma, which it's always tricky, but we'll be looking to fade South Carolina more often. Oklahoma a little more neutral on. Could see playing them in this game. Mississippi State takes on Florida. 9.5-point spread in favor of the Gators, a 52 total. Mississippi State comes off a bye, and Florida comes off a loss, a pretty resounding one to Texas A&M we just talked about. That's a week after they beat Texas in a very, very ugly game. But yeah, it's not been a good season for Florida. They're scrapping wins together, trying to get to a bowl game, which seems unlikely at this point given their 2-4 standing. Mississippi State, they've got problems, but they're still better than last year by a pretty wide margin. Before their bye, they had a loss to Texas A&M, no shame there. They lose to Tennessee in OT, no shame there. Beat Arizona State, beat a good G5 Southern Miss team. So things are looking up for Mississippi State. They're still going to be behind most of the SEC, but that kind of is what it is. For injuries, Fluff Bothwell got carted off in their last game at running back. Albert Reese and Isaac Smith, offensive lineman and defensive back, have both been missing time. But Letty came out and said he hopes to have them back this week, so it's quietly optimistic. Florida, they just can't catch a break. They return guys, more guys go out. Duke Clark and Jacoby Jackson at running back, Tony Livingston at tight end, Deshaun Johnson at corner, Aaron Gates, another defensive back. Caleb Banks is going to be out for a while on that D-line. Kind of messy. So with Mississippi State coming out of the bye, Blake Shapen, he's been a game manager plus, probably is a good way to say it. 67% completion percentage, 8.1 yards per attempt. He has taken 17 sacks. His pressure to sack ratio is nearly 30%. That's way too high. But the skill players have been better than I thought, honestly. Like, maybe the run game will take a hit without Fluff Bothwell, but that's been a top 40 unit. Devon Booth's been okay. The receivers still come in 106, some of that because drops, but I thought this would be worse. Brennan Thompson and Anthony Evans have been decent as far as like cast-offs from other elite schools go. They've been okay. The offensive line is okay, and they have played a lot of good defenses. They played 3 top 20 defensive lines. If we could get back Albert Reese for Jimothy Lewis, this unit might be solidly above average. They're currently slightly below, but they've been very hurt. They lost Luke Work earlier in the year. I don't know if Luke Work is good, but he at least gives them another body. But Albert Reese is one of their best. He's been out for a couple weeks. Getting him back would be awesome because tackles are the problem. The interior has actually been pretty good. Can Florida's defense stand up to them? Probably. Florida's weird. They're 6th in run defense, 113th in pass rush, 61st in coverage. They've now allowed quarterbacks to hit 9 yards per attempt in 2 straight weeks. That was Arch Manning and Marcel Reed. The defensive line they have a lot of good names, man. Like Tyreek Sapp, Cameron James on the edge, Miles Graham at linebacker. I'm not surprised they grade out pretty well in run defense. And honestly, like Devin Moore's a good corner, but the rest of the secondary is pretty limited with this team, especially with the injuries like Johnson going down and Gates. You can throw the ball over the top. I don't know if Mississippi State will have a lot of success doing it, but the path is there. For Florida, DJ Lagway, 67% completion, 6.6 yards per attempt. He has 6 big-time throws, 10 turnover-worthy plays is a problem, 14 sacks. He's clearly dealing with a lower body injury, and it's affected the mobility and probably a lot else. The skill players, I think there's a room for a ceiling here. Jaden Ball's been fine, but they've lost Duke Clark, lost Jacoby Jackson. Hopefully they return soon. The receiving game has a ton of talent. You can see Vernell Brown and Dallas Wilson playing well and flashing. The main problem has been consistency. And then Eugene Wilson, he's been a huge disappointment for this team. So that's how you get wins like Texas, but then lose to USF. It's just a consistency problem for the skill position group. The O-line's actually been pretty good. They've played some elite defensive lines. The only player who's below average is Caden Jones. Otherwise, there might be room for improvement for this unit. This is not a bad offensive line. Mississippi State's defense is 29th overall, 119th in pass rush, 27th in coverage. They got beat by Aguilar, over 8 yards per attempt there, but everyone else has been below 7.8. It's been easier to run on this team. Texas A&M just hit nearly 6 yards per carry. it's an average defense. They're kind of the story with Mississippi State is they're not good, but they're improved everywhere. So they're no longer the team you just walk over in this conference. But I respect this Florida team. Playing in the swamp would make this a little bit wider than the 9, right around 10. So not something I'm going to play, but do lean the Gators' direction. We'll watch and see where this goes. We've got the total at 50, so maybe something towards an under could be a play to potentially look at. Last one here is Georgia Tech and Duke. This is a 1.5-point spread in favor of Duke. A 61 total may surprise some people, surprise me right away, but Georgia Tech has had their struggles, man. Like this team, first of all, injuries. Tana Alupuluolo. Sorry, man. An offensive lineman's hurt for them. Akello Stone also banged up on defense. For Duke, a lot of linebackers. Trey Freeman, he's been out. Bradley Gompers, he was out last game. Nick Morse is out for the year. And then Terry Moore, of course, defensive back. Georgia Tech beats Colorado, a game they nearly lost, but that was largely turnovers in their own doing. They had a 98% post-game win expectancy. They beat a Clemson team in a win that's aged poorly, and they had a 32% post-game win expectancy in that game. They beat Wake Forest with a 22% post-game win expectancy, and then they just beat the corpse of Virginia Tech. So undefeated Georgia Tech looks great from a record perspective. They should have 2 losses already this year. Duke should probably have more wins. If they weren't turning the ball over incessantly, they should have been at least in a competitive game against Illinois. They were moving the ball at will, but they had 5 turnovers that led right to 28 Illinois points. They lose to Tulane, same deal there. Duke missed a field goal, had another one blocked, and they had 2 turnover on downs, important ones. It was a mess. Since then, they beat NC State, they beat Syracuse, and they beat Cal. It has not always been pretty. The defense has been a problem for Duke, but there are positives to this team. As far as the offense for Georgia Tech goes, they go as Haynes King goes. He's the team's leading rusher. He's not throwing the ball a lot, but he doesn't have any turnover-worthy plays, and he's only taken 4 sacks. So the negative plays just generally are not there for Haynes King. The skill players, they're up and down. The backfield is good. Malachi Hosley's played really well. He's actually outplayed Jamal Haynes on the ground, but Haynes still has this role. He's an excellent pass catcher. The leading receiver is Isaiah Canyon, which is really weird because they invest in Eric Rivers. They bring Malik Rutherford back. It's been disappointing receiving room for this team so far this year. And the offensive line is a big question for me. They've played some solid defensive lines, but they're coming in around average more than anything else. The biggest liability is Joe Fusil. I expect this team to probably be around like 60th when it's all said and done. So can that work against Duke? I mean, probably. Duke has been decent up front. Their secondary has been victimized routinely, and they've got one good player outside of Chandler Rivers, and he's hurt. It's Terry Moore. So without him, you can just throw the ball over the top of this team. Georgia Tech doesn't want to do that, so I'm very curious to see how this matchup plays out on the field. Meanwhile, Darian Mintz has been awesome. 69% completion, 8.9 yards per attempt, 14 big-time throws, 6 turnover-worthy plays, and 2 interceptions. He has taken 13 sacks, which is a little high, but really impressed with the skill players. Nate Shepard continues to receive more work as he should. He's at 8 yards per carry. Cooper Barcade and Kayshawn Brown have been awesome at receiver. They have good role players there with like Angelo Anthony, Samir Higgins. The offensive line has been awesome. They have one weak link at guard. They've not found an answer there. They're rotating it. But Brian Parker has been phenomenal. Your other 3 starters above average. It's a good O-line. Georgia Tech's defense, it was awful last year, so they bring in a new DC. They're 103rd this year. 84th in run defense, 100th in pass rush, 101st in coverage. They've faced 2 offenses ranked higher than 91st, Clemson and Temple. They've allowed 5 yards per carry 3 times this year to Clemson, Wake Forest, and Virginia Tech. Kyron Jones was at 8.6 yards per attempt through the air. They've got 2 good players so far, Amari Harvey and Jordan Vandenberg. Duke has played better defenses than this and moved the ball. So honestly, I think the box score is probably tripping a lot of people up in this game, seeing Georgia Tech, an undefeated Georgia Tech, as an underdog. But I think Duke is the better team here. We make this closer to a field goal. I don't love it. I had the same intuition as probably a lot of you. You know, you see Georgia Tech, an undefeated Georgia Tech team, as a dog to Duke. The alarm bells go off. I mean, it was eye-opening. But then you dive into it, and as I did more and more research and looked at efficiency metrics and past performance, I could understand how Duke came in as a favorite. I'm going to do a little more work on this game and then hopefully find something worth playing later in the week. But I understand the spread right now. It's not at least something that's really tripping me up anymore. But that'll do it for us today. Thank you guys for watching. If you have requests, please leave them in the comments for the show later this week. But until then, thank you for watching. Good luck. We will see you guys later.